Good morning to all of you, my colleagues who are here. We have also Mr. Cecil Shillingford, who is our advisor on disaster matters, and also the head of the ODM, Mr. Pascal, Ambassador Gregoire, Mr. Greg Thomas, who is responsible for the committee, food and supplies, general supplies of NEPO, and of course the media, and to all Dominicans listening, both here and overseas. Let me thank you for the media for responding to the request for this press conference to update our country, our citizens, on what Dominica's response to Hurricane Irma has been thus far. First of all, I want to thank the Office of Disaster Management for the excellent advice that they have been providing myself and the cabinet in respect to our own preparations for Hurricane Irma, and also, in our case, of a tropical storm. And we're very grateful for the professional advice and the professional manner in which they've been conducting the affairs at the ODM, because these things are very helpful. We rely on them to advise us on the situation and actions to be taken, and we can always rely on them for this. And also, they've been very helpful too in the way we treat with our response to other islands. I also want to commend the leadership of Honorable Blackmore, who is the Minister for National Security and the Minister whose portfolio responsibility it is for disaster management in Dominica. He had to keep me informed and abreast on issues every day, and he was exceptional in this. I'm very grateful to him. And he's also been appointed the chairman of the Cabinet Subcommittee to coordinate Dominica's response and assistance to the hurricane ravaged countries, along with other ministers. And he's also the chairman of the joint committee, the private sector and the public sector, in coordinating Dominica's response to Hurricane Irma. I want to say to you, before this storm, Dominica was involved in making contact with the respective countries in which the path was, the hurricane path would have traversed, and to ensure that they were taking the appropriate actions in preparation for this storm. As a matter of fact, even during the hurricane, I was personally in touch with the Premier of the BVI, and also the Chief Minister of Anguilla, and also the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda during the time, and the Chief Minister of Anguilla in particular was almost giving me a ball by ball of what was taking place in Anguilla with regards to the heavy winds which Anguilla suffered during the hurricane. And post the hurricane, we've been in contact with them. I have spoken directly to every single government leader in these countries, with the exception of St. Martin, but we have been in touch with the Dutch government and also the French government, because they have a tremendous role as dependent territories as small countries over the dependent territories of St. Martin, Dutch St. Martin and French St. Martin respectively. And I have now been in touch with the Prime Minister of Dutch St. Martin through an intermediary, and I'm expecting to speak to the Dutch Prime Minister, St. Martin Prime Minister this afternoon by telephone. This morning I had a very lengthy discussion with the Governor of St. Thomas, who was relaying to me the situation in St. Thomas and the actions which the government, both the island government and of course the federal government, are taking in assisting citizens and responding to the disaster. I have been in touch directly with the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, in respect to the storm. I also met with the governors of, in addition to the local leadership in Anguilla and BVI, also met with the governor of these two territories, the governors of these two territories. And on my request, I wrote to the chairman of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, suggesting that an urgent meeting or an emergency meeting of CARICOM be convened to discuss and to coordinate CARICOM's response to the hurricane. That meeting was convened on Saturday the 9th of September, where a number of issues were discussed and a number of actions taken for follow-up action by CARICOM. I have also been assisting the chairman of the OECS, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Honorable Alan Shastine. And as a matter of fact, as you would have known, I also accompanied him to visit physically the BVI, Tortola, Anguilla, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Antigua. So we visited these territories, these countries. Yesterday, it was a very exhausting trip, but very worthwhile trip. And I will speak to the situation in these countries very soon. As chairman of the Monetary Council, I suggested to the Council of Ministers, that a contribution be made to the countries within the currency union, financial contribution be made to assist these countries in responding to the disaster. So the Council has accepted that suggestion and approved 1 million EC dollars to Antigua and Barbuda, 1 million EC dollars to Anguilla, and $250,000 to St. Kitts and Nevis to assist them in response to this storm. The board of directors of the bank, that suggestion didn't come from me, but the board of directors of the bank suggested that Dominica should have received a contribution for the damage at the Douglas Childs Airport, but I respectfully declined the offer of assistance to Dominica because, this is what has happened is in other territories is complete, is extremely pale, the devastation in our member territories. So I'm very grateful to the council members for accepting this recommendation and approving these contributions to these countries. We've also been in contact with, as I said, in respect to St. Martin, both the French and the Dutch, and assisting them in communicating with CARICOM and CDMA and so forth, because there were issues of communication. The command post for St. Martin is located in Curacao, and because the logistics on the ground in St. Martin were very difficult, but progress has been made, and I'll speak to those progress in these islands. So as I indicated, I visited, and of course, in respect to Anguilla and especially the BVI, we were able to get the Venezuelan government to agree to provide a military aircraft over Thursday, Friday, going on the weekend, to transport, to airlift supplies, urgent supplies to the BVI and Anguilla. The government of Venezuela agreed because they were also involved heavily in the evacuation of the residents from Barbuda. They sent in helicopters and military aircraft to assist. But we encountered some diplomatic hurdles, and unfortunately, we were not able to have the supplies airlifted to BVI and Anguilla. Because as you know, these are dependent territories, and they would have to get authorization from a higher authority outside of these countries. But you experience these things in these circumstances, and you have to look at alternative means. And we discussed alternative means last night in Antigua, and we able to utilize the British aircraft came in yesterday, and we're able to send some supplies along with what the British had to these islands, utilizing the British assets. In terms of Dominica, further, and of course, just to say to you that the situation in BVI is grave. They suffered extensive damage. Literally every single home and business enterprise was affected in the entire BVI islands, not only Tortola, but all of the islands. And as a matter of fact, up to yesterday afternoon, they had not been able to access Virgin Gorda. They were making attempts at the time to get a boat to take them across to see what would have happened in Virgin Gorda. But there's no electricity in any part of the BVI except through persons who have small generators and stuff like that. Water is a problem. The water system has been severely damaged, so there's no pipe-borne water except those who have collected through the cisterns and still have some left. Access, is still compromised in many parts with fallen trees and telephone lines. Virtually almost every telephone and electricity pole has been either broken or uprooted or something. So it's going to take them some time to have electricity restored in there. Fortunately for them, the airport is functioning now, and also the seaport was opened officially, authorized to be opened yesterday. So they will start they can get supplies from ourselves in the Caribbean and also from Puerto Rico and elsewhere. So these are two good things that are happening there. From what I've seen, the British have been very helpful in deploying military personnel. Luckily for them, there was a ship just about 100 miles off the island, sitting out the hurricane, and as soon as the hurricane is over, they're moving into Anguilla and the BVI. And they've been very helpful in assisting with providing security to the country, because every single person's home was affected, including the Premier's home and all his ministers and so forth. The hope is that they would have convened a cabinet meeting yesterday for the first time, or possibly today, so that they can put things in motion. So the situation in BVI is very, very grave, and from the estimates, you're talking about a few billions of dollars in damage, and it is very serious in the BVI. But they were making some progress, in trying to find a way through this very difficult situation. In Anguilla, Anguilla also suffered extensive damage to all of the schools, the primary and secondary schools, the hospital. There is no electricity in Anguilla, any part of Anguilla, except, again, those who would have generators. So they will need a lot of help with linesmen and to erect the poles and to run the cables and so forth, the wires and so forth, to have electricity restored there. So it is. They also receive extensive damage there. They started to clean up. I really must commend the leadership of the Chief Minister Banks, and people mobilizing themselves. I was able to meet with a large contingent of Dominicans to reassure them and also reassure the Anguillan people of our commitment to assist in Anguilla in its rebuilding efforts. Anguilla and the BVI have been exceptional to us as Dominicans, allowing our citizens to reside there and to create a life for themselves. And so we have a vested interest in the quick rebuilding of the BVI and Anguilla. Also visited St. Kitts, and St. Kitts, as you know, also got affected. Not as extensive as the others, because in the other islands, Anguilla and BVI, the entire country was affected. But there's a third of St. Kitts with no water, and I believe more than a third with no electricity. So they're getting assistance from the OECS countries, especially St. Lucia, with linesmen to restore the lines and the water system. So, and of course, there's some homes got damaged and so on. But at least you have a greater portion of St. Kitts that's able to assist the affected part of St. Kitts, and so things are basically under control there. In Antigua, we did not get an opportunity to travel to Barbuda because of the darkness and so on. And there be no electricity in Barbuda. But the government has been able to evacuate everyone but 6 people from Barbuda. So they have been evacuated and placed in shelters in Antigua. We visited one of the shelters to meet with the residents there and to speak with them. And of course, in Barbuda, there are security personnel there and so forth to ensure that there's no undue trespassing there by others and so forth. But everybody has been evacuated but 6 people in Barbuda. We have been able to provide the government of Antigua with some advice. As you know, we have similar experience with relocation of communities. They've asked me to send some of the information to them in writing, and I was hoping to do so during the course of the week and to assist them in how to what are the things to pay attention to, because it is not easy for people to leave their homes and to be living in shelters and their way of life dramatically interrupted. It's a serious psychological challenge, but I must say that the government of Antigua has provided adequately for them, which is good, and people are in good spirits, understanding the situation, and recognizing that it could have been worse. There could have been more deaths in Barbuda when you look at the extent of the destruction of Hurricane Irma. So these countries are badly affected. We've been in touch with the Dutch, and once they give us the all clear, I will travel to St. Martin, both French and Dutch St. Martin, to visit with the government there and also to empathize with the citizens of these countries and to have an interaction with the Dominican community in these 2 islands of the Dutch and French St. Martin, because the airport on the Dutch side suffered extensive damage, and so even sometimes you want to go there, but you also have to be mindful of the inconvenience which sometimes your presence creates. So I'm always mindful of that, and this is one reason why I have not been to Houston, for example, because if I go to Houston, then the police have to be there to provide security, the Secret Service, and the medical personnel, and so forth, and these are people who should be focusing on assisting those who are truly impacted. So in Houston, I sent both Ambassador Henderson and Barnes to visit with them and to see the condition and to have an interaction with them. And from all reports, it was well received and appreciated by those by our citizens who are resident in Houston. So once I get the clearance to go to St. Martin, I will travel there to meet with them and to see how we can work with them on this. We've made the cabinet has made certain contribution to the various countries affected. In respect to Antigua, we're making a direct financial contribution of $250,000 to St. Kitts and Nevis, $500,000 EC dollars. To St. Thomas, $200,000, and to Cuba, who's been affected over the weekend, $250,000 to assist these governments with their relief efforts and assisting the citizens who were affected by the tropical storm. With regards to St. Martin, BVI, and Anguilla, their urgent priority now, urgent need, as they've indicated to us, is in respect to water and supplies, and tarpaulins and stuff like that. So we are focusing on these 3 islands in respect to relief supplies. And later on, I will ask Honorable Blackmore and also Mr. Cecil Shillenford to brief you on some of the actions we've taken in respect to sending the supplies to these countries. But we are certainly going to be sending quite a bit of supplies, an initial amount of supplies, and certainly subsequent to that, additional supplies to these 3 islands to assist with provisioning for all the citizens and residents affected in these areas. As you know, these islands are on a regular basis, they're challenged for water, drinking water, potable water. So you can understand, in light of this disaster, the great challenge. We also, one of the matters we placed on the discussion at CARICOM on Saturday, at the CARICOM meeting on Saturday, is the issue of Dominica supplying bulk water to these islands. So now we are looking at the possibility of using barges, get these inflated containers, place on the barge, fill it up with water, and have it transported to these islands. So we are working with CARICOM on this. We're exploring, Dominica is exploring with other countries, and also CARICOM, for the Secretary General, has been exploring with friendly governments and institutions to see whether we can have those badges. There's some badges available. What we need now are the containers, the containers to have these waters to fill up with water, so that on an ongoing basis we will be in a position to supply drinking water to these countries in bulk. Because the bottled water is fine, but in terms for cooking and even for bathing and sanitation and so forth, the bulk water is critical. And of course, these barges can land on the beach and have a forklift lift up the water containers and place on the beach or a safe area, so people can come in there and fill their utensils and so forth to take to their homes. So we're looking at this as a matter that we're giving very serious consideration, because that, in our mind, would help dramatically and tremendously in respect to our assistance to St. Martin, BVI, and Anguilla. And because this is something I've been putting before the CARICOM for a very long time, that in disasters, water is always an issue. The need for water is always critical. And we suggested that we use we have a water tanker that we could all make a contribution towards purchasing. And when a country needs it, then a country like Dominica, a country like St. Lucia or St. Vincent with water could assist these countries. Because I recall when Hurricane Irma affected St. Lucia, we had a huge challenge. We had to use the Coast Guard vessel. The Coast Guard vessel could only transport a certain quantity. But if we have a tanker, thousands of gallons of water we could have shipped to St. Lucia on a daily basis, you know. So we're looking at this very seriously. But whatever utensils we end up having, but we'll certainly be shipping some bulk water to St. Martin and to Anguilla and to the BVI, in addition to the bottled water, which will be shipping, I believe, hopefully tomorrow. The boats will leave tomorrow for these islands. In addition to that, we're deploying police officers to the BVI and Barbuda. In the BVI, there are several prisoners who have escaped from the prisons, several of them. So that poses a security threat to the island, and also in Barbuda, of course, to avoid people coming in and taking advantage of the situation, to ensure that there is proper security. And of course, we sent in some personnel to BVI yesterday. I saw them at the airport in BVI as part of the CDMO team, and we prepared to provide additional human resources to these islands based on the request. So we are keeping in touch with governments and doing all we can. As I indicated sometime last week, we're looking at the possibility of setting up a fund, especially for Dominicans affected in these islands. And our hope is that we would get contributions. And as a matter of fact, I'll be writing during the course of this week to our new citizens of high net worth and seek to get them to make certain contributions to this fund, so that Dominicans who may be in need of particular help, we can use that fund to assist them And I'm hoping that by Wednesday or so, those letters will go out to a selected number of Dominicans of high net worth across the world, or new citizens, to call on them to make a contribution to their brothers and sisters in the diaspora who've been affected. Now, on the question of the mass evacuation of Dominicans from these islands, I think it would be a badly conceived idea, and it is something that should not be encouraged. Uh, these our Dominicans in these islands are part of the community in St. Martin and the BVI, and we believe that they have a responsibility to remain there and to assist with the rebuilding of these countries, because in many of these countries, the Dominicans play a very critical role in the economic and social development of these countries. And if they were to be removed, extracted from these islands, it would make it even more difficult for these countries to recover from the disaster. Because many of us, as a matter of fact, when I was in the BVI, the Minister of Public Works, Mr. Vanterpool, was thanking me for the presence of Dominicans in BVI because they have had the experience of Hurricane David. So they know of the challenges, they know of the difficulties we had in Hurricane David, and they are playing a critical role. As a matter of fact, in the NEMO, which is the National Emergency Management Organization of BVI, there were several Dominicans who were part of this and who were helping you coordinating. So you can imagine the Dominicans who were police officers, who were nurses, who were doctors, who were engineers, who were builders there, who were business people there, they own businesses there. So I mean, when I look at St. Martin, even from my own constituency, there are people who are there. They're absolutely critical to the maintenance of the society in St. Martin. And whether they're metallurgical officers or they're business owners or teachers and police officers, they're into politics there and representation there. So if we go to remove these people, extract them, I think it will be a bad signal from part of the government to want to do this to a sister country that has been exceptionally helpful to Dominica. What we are doing and what we will do as a government is that persons who, for one reason or the other, because of the vulnerabilities, you may have also children in school who want to continue school, we will assist them in transporting them to Dominica. As a matter of fact, we have gotten a commitment from the president of the Regional Council of Martinique. He's making a ferry available for 150 seats. I was just speaking to CARICOM. CARICOM also, based on Saturday meeting and of course this morning, also coordinating the airlifting of CARICOM nationals who, for one reason or the other, there's some people who are there for holidays. There are people who are on short stays and who want to come back because they do not have a physical presence or permanence in those islands. But somebody who's been in Anguilla and Antigua and so forth. And that's why I said to Dominicans in Anguilla when I met them, I said, look, if you have children who you really want to get into school, because there are already Dominicans who have offered to host these children in their homes and so forth, we would assist with transporting these students back and ensuring that spaces at the schools are made available to them and providing them with all of the logistical support to attend any school of their choice in Dominica. But it is, you see, when you're faced with these situations, you cannot be irrational in your thinking. You have to be temperate, because these situations require some level of a temperance that is calm and calculated and focused, because you need to provide a leadership. So anybody out there who's been pushing the idea of evacuating, do not give these people money, evacuate them, and so on. It is in these circumstances, the first 72 hours, 96 hours, people not knowing their bearings, not knowing what happened to their family in the community, they do not know where they're going to sleep tonight, there'll be anxiety. And I experienced a lot of anxiety with Dominicans who I had communication with through WhatsApp in St. Martin, over the weekend, Fridays, Thursday, Fridays, and so on. But speaking to them this morning, they're up and about, and they found the bearings and so on. They've been called to work, and they're going to work and to clean the offices and to see what they can do to start their lives over again and to build the country. Our countries in the Caribbean are resilient. It's not the first time St. Martin has been faced with a major hurricane. It is not the first time the BVI has been faced with a major hurricane, or Anguilla. We've all been faced with major hurricanes and disasters, and these countries have bounced back faster than any one of us would have expected, or any of them would have expected. So we have a certain resilience in the Caribbean, and the melting pot nature of these islands will assist in rebuilding. And what we should be doing is to provide them with all the moral support they require, and all of the tangible support we can reasonably afford. And so this is where the whole country has to come forward. But let us not create in the minds of the people an unnecessary panic by what we utter here in Dominica. Let us be reasoned with our utterances. Let us be clear on this. The destruction and damage up there is exceptional. It is tremendous. It is heart-wrenching to see the suffering of people. But by the grace of God and our help, as an international community, as a regional community, I am satisfied that people will rebound and resettle their lives. So I do not subscribe, neither do I want to promote, and I want to dissuade persons who have been making those statements in the public. Desist from making those statements. They're not helpful. You may believe that you're sounding intelligent, but I'm telling you, this is not the right way to go. Leadership requires a certain level of soberness, a certain level of reason in addressing these serious issues. And we must be very careful that we don't appear in the eyes of these people, especially the quote-unquote indigenous people of this country, that we're making fun of their situation. And we're not serious about our intent, our willingness to help. You understand? We have to be careful with this. And I really want to send a very strong verse. We should avoid appearing to be partisan in our approach and our response to the needs of the people. When we were hit in 2015, and we don't have to go back to Hurricane David, because many of us were not born, and those of us who were there would be very young and so forth, and so forth. I was only about a few years, Hurricane David. But we don't have to go back to Hurricane. All of us, majority of us would have been alive, at least those of us who can speak, would have been alive in 2015. And we know of the outpouring of support from these countries. It was overwhelming. It was tremendous. When you had unemployed senior citizen, taking one tin of milk from a cupboard and putting it in a bag and sending it to Dominica. We have to understand that there was a massive movement in the Caribbean, in the world, in assisting Dominica in a time of need. And we all must play our part. The little that we have, play our part in assisting these countries, in getting them to return to a sense of normalcy, so they can rebuild their country in a quick fashion. Once they know, and you saw it in the expressions, you saw it in their utterances. You heard it in their utterances. The mere presence of the chairman of the OECS, who I accompanied, and I must commend him for his leadership, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, and myself, people felt a sense of hope that we're not alone. People know what has happened to us, and people are prepared to assist, and people are assisting us, and gives them a certain motivation to get up from their slumber, to get up from their days, and to start getting things moving. So we have to provide the support to them, and I know from my own experiences as a leader of this country, what I had to deal with, and the difference which a visit from a leader made to our country, to our citizens, the difference which the lending hand played in responding. My final point before I call on the Minister for National Security is in respect to the financing of the rebuilding of its countries. Dominica signed and ratified the Climate Paris Accord, and we have been strong advocates of getting this agreement concluded, because the international community had been kicking this proverbial can down the road at every COP summit. Fortunately, we were able to get an agreement in Paris with the leadership of the president of China, with the leadership of the then president of the United States of America, and the leadership of the then president of France and other world leaders. But for the Paris Accord to make sense to us, who are the main sufferers of climate change, the mechanism for getting the resources to us to build resilience is critical. We cannot subject the resources that have been pledged, the $100 billion that have been pledged, to protracted bureaucratic procedures. I made the point in Antigua last night that these disasters are not going to wait for us to put things in place. They are coming every year. And the disaster experts will tell you we now have to extend the hurricane season. You understand? And gone are the days, I keep saying, if 15 years ago, 20 years ago, anybody would tell us Dominica could flood, we would just laugh at them. Because rain would fall for weeks, it would flow in our ravines, it would flow in our dry ravines and our rivers and go to the oceans. But now, in many parts of Dominica, from the time it rains, we get anxious because we're fearful of flooding. So it is changing. Christmas time, it's supposed to be chilly and nice and so forth, a nice breeze. But we saw what happened a few years ago with Christmas drought. So this disaster is going to come in all forms, all shapes and forms and types. I mean, the Hurricane Irma was beyond a Category 5. And they only had Category 5 hurricane, you see. So, and it's going to get worse based on what the experts are predicting. And the only way we can mitigate against damage and destruction and loss of life and property is by building a more resilient society. You understand? And, for example, this is one of the reasons why even for the Roosevelt Enhancement Program, we've been saying to the telecommunication companies, we've been saying to the electricity company, we need to put the cables on the ground, because if these cables in Anguilla and on the ground, there'll have been no real problems with the poles, no poles. So even going forward, all of those things we need to take into consideration. Do we still continue to have poles running all over the country and so forth? When every disaster comes, they'll be broken and we have to spend millions to put them back up? Or should we just start looking gradually, because it's going to be a very costly exercise, to start putting these cables on the ground and so forth. So these are, as a matter of fact, in Anguilla, the only little juice you could get for just after the hurricane was from Flo, because Flo had one section of Anguilla underground, and it's only that section that was able to provide you with some juice, as we say it, as young people. I'm not sure whether Ambassador Gregor will know that the term, but so we need to sit down as a country and look at this, and to be advised on the climate resilient infrastructure we're talking about. And this is why we've been taking the opportunity as a result of Erica to build back better. You understand? Many of these structures could have been up long time ago, because we have the resources for most of them, but we have to take our time to design these properly, ensure that structural engineers look at it. For example, the Emsworth Bridge, we have had a design for several months, but we need to get a structural engineer to go through this carefully, taking into consideration the hydrological studies, and ensuring that the designs have taken into consideration the hydrological studies to inform the design so that it can withstand. And the same thing the Chinese have taken into consideration in designing of the bridges and the eventual construction of the bridges. So if Erica were to happen again, God forbid, then we will not have those bridges washed away. So all of these things we need to take in consideration. So we'll be mounting up a very serious campaign on behalf of these countries. I have offered, and they have accepted, for me to accompany them to the international community to assist in raising funds to respond to these disasters. And it's a very clear message. I mean, in Antigua, for example, they have a very serious challenge. Because of Antigua's per capita income, they cannot access grants and concessionary loans from the World Bank and other institutions. And they're now going to be graduated further, which is taking them further away from the ability to attract funds. So we have to address this issue. And what we're saying to the international community is that we cannot only look at one variable, that is your per capita income, and not look at your vulnerabilities, your vulnerability to external shocks, to natural disasters. You understand? All of those things can impact on you, because when you look at our debt, for example, a lot of our debt has to do with our response to disasters. You know, because you cannot wait for the funds to become available and people are suffering. You have to fetch the monies wherever you can legally find them, and so you find yourself forcing to have to go to commercial loans at 10%, 8% to refinance or to finance your reconstruction. So we will be, because this country is going to need a lot of money. I mean, the government of Antigua is going to reconstruct Barbuda. You just have to think of the enormity of this task and the rebuilding of BVI and Anguilla. And while the British government will assist them, they also have to raise a significant amount of the funds themselves to rebuild. There are several families with no insurance, both private dwellings and businesses. And how do you treat these people? You know, so it's a huge task, and we're in total solidarity with them. We will provide the support to them based on where they want us to, what role they want us to play. I said to all of the governments, we are at the disposal. We are there to help. We're there to assist in whatever way we can. We're not going to force ourselves, but we're here to help. And so far they've been requesting our help, and we've been responding. And but we empathize with them. We stand in solidarity with them.